Medical emergency. The human has gone silent for 6 hours and shows no distress signals. Kael'thas's communication tendrils flared bright orange with panic as he burst into the medical bay, his young voice cracking across 3 frequency ranges simultaneously. Behind him, Azila stumbled through the door. Her sensory organs expanded to maximum diameter, pupils dilated with fear. 6 hours? Senior Medical Officer Zilax's entire body stiffened, his communication organs immediately shifting to emergency crimson. 6 hours of complete silence? Why wasn't I notified immediately? We thought. Kael'thas's voice harmonics shook. We thought she was just resting at first. But she hasn't spoken, hasn't called out, hasn't made any distress sounds at all. Across 3-star systems, emergency protocols activated. The news that the human ambassador assigned to the Galactic Council's youth diplomatic training vessel had gone completely silent triggered immediate crisis responses. For the Velkari species, whose members maintained constant vocal and harmonic communication from birth to death, silence meant only one thing: death or injuries so severe that vocalization became impossible. The Galactic Council's emergency session convened within minutes, representatives materializing as holograms in their respective chambers, communication organs blazing with concern across dozens of species. High Diplomat Vexthul's image flickered into existence at the head of the assembly, his senior status marked by the complex harmonic patterns that surrounded his form. "Status report," Vexthul demanded, his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades of diplomatic service. "Where is the human now?" "Observation lounge, level 7, Azila managed, her medical training barely keeping her panic contained. She's been there since the morning cycle began, just sitting, not moving much, not calling for help, not—" Her voice broke into a distressed harmonic that made several council members flinch. "Not making any sound at all." "Has she responded to direct communication attempts?" another council member asked. "We haven't tried," Kael'thas admitted, his tendrils drooping with shame. "We didn't want to cause her additional distress if she's injured. You know how fragile humans are supposed to be. We were afraid direct contact might—" "Get me a visual," Vexthul interrupted. Now. The central display shimmered, showing the observation lounge in perfect clarity. And there, in a comfortable chair positioned near the viewport, sat Ambassador Emma, humanity's representative to the Youth Diplomatic Program. She was completely still, or at least still by Velkari standards. Her chest rose and fell with breathing. One hand occasionally lifted to turn a page of the physical book resting in her lap, and every few minutes she reached for a steaming cup on the small table beside her. She looked utterly, perfectly calm. "She's alive," Zilax said, his medical training warring with his cultural instincts. "All vital signs appear normal. Breathing steady, heart rate within human parameters, no visible injuries." "Then why isn't she talking?" Kael'thas burst out, his young voice cracking across all frequencies. "Why isn't she calling for anyone? Why isn't she communicating?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, because none of them knew. In 6 months of hosting human ambassador Emma aboard their diplomatic training vessel, they'd grown accustomed to her strange ways. Her need for personal space, her odd sleeping schedule, her bizarre preference for consuming heated water with plant matter mixed in. But this, 6 hours of complete, voluntary silence. It was incomprehensible. "She took a drink," Azila said suddenly, her medical sensors locked on the display. "Did you see? She just took a drink. If she were injured, would she be drinking tea?" "Maybe it's medicinal," Kael'thas suggested desperately. "Maybe human medical protocols require silence during treatment." "I'm pulling up the human medical database now," Zilax announced, his communication organs flickering rapidly as he accessed the files. "According to this, humans can survive and maintain normal function for extended periods without vocalization, but—" He paused, his harmonics shifting to confusion. "But there's no context here for why they would do that. Every species vocalizes to maintain social bonds, to signal wellness, to coordinate group activities. What if she's been abandoned by her pod? Azila whispered, the thought clearly horrifying her. What if Earth has cast her out and she's too traumatized to speak? The council chamber erupted in distressed harmonics. The idea of a sentient being cut off from their social group, left to suffer in silence. It was every Velkari's deepest nightmare. We need to intervene, Vexthul decided. Carefully, Kael'thas, Azila. You have the most experience with Ambassador Emma. Approach her slowly. Try to assess her condition without causing alarm. I'm dispatching emergency medical teams to your location. Should we erect a containment field? Zilax asked. For her protection. Do it, Vexthul confirmed. If she's in some kind of psychological crisis, we can't risk her harming herself further. In the observation lounge, Emma turned another page of her book, completely unaware that 3 decks away, 2 young aliens were preparing to save her life. Kael'thas and Azila moved through the corridors with the careful, deliberate steps of people approaching a dangerous situation. Other crew members gave them wide berth, their own communication organs dimmed in respect for the crisis. By now, everyone aboard knew. The human had gone silent. What do we do if she doesn't respond? Azila whispered, her voice barely registering on the lower frequencies. What if she can't respond? Then we get her to medical immediately, Kael'thas replied, trying to sound braver than he felt. Even if we have to carry her. They reached the observation lounge entrance. Through the transparent panels, they could see Emma, still in her chair, still reading, still silent. On 3, Kael'thas said. 1, 2. The doors opened with their standard soft chime. Emma's eyes flickered up from her book for just a moment, acknowledged their presence with a small smile, and returned to her reading. She didn't speak. Kael'thas felt his heart's hammering in his chest cavity. Azila's medical sensors were going wild, trying to detect any sign of injury, any explanation for this terrifying silence. Ambassador Emma? Kael'thas tried, his voice gentle, his harmonics deliberately soothing. Are you well? Emma's eyes lifted again. She looked at them with what appeared to be mild confusion. Then, and this was the part that would be analyzed in diplomatic academies for generations, she smiled, placed a finger to her lips in the human gesture they'd learned meant quiet, and pointed to her book. Then she went back to reading. Behind them, unnoticed by Emma, a shimmering containment field materialized, sealing the observation lounge. Emergency medical teams were already racing down the corridors. High Diplomat Vexthul had activated his personal transport, determined to handle this crisis himself. And in her comfortable chair, surrounded by the silent void of space, Ambassador Emma turned another page and took another sip of her tea, enjoying what she thought was a perfectly normal, peaceful afternoon. She made the silence gesture. Azila's voice pitched into ultrasonic ranges of pure distress. She's trying to tell us she can't speak. Something's damaged her vocal apparatus. Kael'thas's tendrils went rigid with horror. We need to get her to medical now. Nobody move. Zilax's voice cut through the panic as he strode into the observation lounge, his senior medical insignia pulsing with authority. His scanning equipment hummed to life, bathing Emma in diagnostic light from 7 different spectrum ranges. Emma glanced up again, this time with a slight frown of confusion. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then seemed to remember something and closed it again, shaking her head with what looked like amusement. She held up one finger, the human, "Wait a moment," gesture, and turned her attention back to her book. Impossible, Zilax muttered, his equipment chirping with increasingly contradictory data. Vocal cords intact, respiratory system perfect, neural pathways to speech centers completely functional, larynx undamaged. She should be able to speak. But she's not, Kael'thas interrupted desperately. Why would she refuse to speak unless something is terribly wrong? Throughout the ship, crew members had stopped their duties. Constant communication, the backbone of Velkari existence, had gone quiet as everyone focused their attention on the unfolding crisis. The silence of their usual shipboard chatter was itself disturbing, a collective, held breath waiting for resolution. Vexthul materialized in the corridor outside the observation lounge, his transport having delivered him from the council chambers in record time. His long career had prepared him for many diplomatic emergencies, but a silent human was somehow more terrifying than any of them. 6.5 hours now, he said grimly, reviewing the data streaming to his personal console. In our entire database of human behavioral studies, we have no recorded instance of voluntary silence lasting this long. Even human sleep cycles include vocalization. They call them dreams and snoring. What if it's a human mourning ritual? Azila suggested suddenly. What if someone from Earth died and she's honoring them with silence? The theory spread through the ship's communication network like wildfire. It made horrible, tragic sense. A human, cut off from her home world, learning of some devastating loss, unable to vocalize her grief. We should contact Earth immediately, Vexthul decided. Find out if there's been any... High Diplomat, look! Kel'Thas pointed at the observation lounge. Emma had finished her tea. She was standing up, stretching in that peculiar human way, arms raised above her head. She walked to the viewport, gazed out at the stars for a long moment, then returned to her chair. From a small bag beside it, she pulled out another book, a different one, and settled back in to read. She's mobile. Zilax confirmed, his medical sensors tracking every movement. Full range of motion, no signs of pain or distress. She's just choosing different books? This doesn't make sense. Kel'Thas wailed, his young voice breaking. Why would anyone choose silence? How is she not going insane from isolation? Inside the containment field, Emma noticed the shimmer for the first time. She looked up from her new book, really looked around the observation lounge, and finally seemed to register that something unusual was happening. Her eyebrows, those strange human facial features, drew together in confusion. She stood up, book still in hand, and walked toward the containment field's edge. When she reached it, she pressed her hand against the barrier and finally opened her mouth to speak. What's going on? Why's there a containment field? Every alarm in the medical bay went silent. The sound of Emma's voice, casual, confused, completely normal, hit the assembled Velkari like a physical wave. She spoke! Azila shrieked, her medical sensors spinning wildly. She's recovered! The vocal damage has healed! There was no damage, Zilax said slowly, his harmonics shifting to baffled confusion. She was always capable of speech. She just wasn't doing it. Emma looked from one alien face to another, her confusion deepening. Okay, seriously, what's happening? Why are you all staring at me like that? And why? She rapped her knuckles against the containment field. Am I in a force field? You were silent, Kel'Thas burst out, all his training and diplomatic composure abandoned in the face of his overwhelming relief and confusion. For 6.5 hours, you didn't speak, you didn't call out, you didn't communicate with anyone. Emma blinked. I was reading. Reading, Vexthul repeated, his translator struggling with the inflection she'd used. As if that explained everything, as if it were the most obvious thing in the galaxy. Yeah, Emma said, glancing down at the book in her hand. I was enjoying some quiet time. It's my day off, so I thought I'd catch up on my book queue. I've been meaning to finish this series for months. The Velkari exchanged looks of profound incomprehension. You were enjoying silence? Azila's voice came out as barely a whisper. On purpose? Well, yeah, Emma said, her tone suggesting she was explaining something self-evident. Reading's not really a group activity, you know? I like to focus, get into the story. It's hard to do that when people are talking. But you weren't with anyone, Kel'Thas protested. You were completely alone. Exactly. Emma smiled, apparently thinking this clarified matters. Perfect reading conditions. No interruptions, nice view of the stars, good tea. She gestured to her empty cup. Honestly, it's been the best afternoon I've had in weeks. Xilax's communication organs had gone completely still, a sign of such extreme cognitive dissonance that his body didn't know which harmonic to produce. You chose to be alone and silent for pleasure. I mean, when you say it like that, it sounds weird, Emma said, finally starting to grasp that something fundamental had been lost in translation. Don't you guys ever want some quiet time? Just you and a good book? No, 3 voices answered simultaneously, with such force that Emma actually took a step back. Vexthul raised a hand for calm, his diplomatic training reasserting itself despite his reeling worldview. Ambassador Emma, I think we need to understand something here. For Velkari, for most species in the Galactic Council actually, silence indicates death, severe injury, or psychological trauma. We communicate constantly from the moment we're born until the moment we die. It's how we know we're alive, how we maintain our sense of self, how we connect to our communities. Silence, Azila added, her voice still shaking, is the absence of life. It's what happens when someone is cut off from their pod, when they're dying alone, when they've been cast out. Oh, Emma said, and for the first time, understanding dawned in her eyes. Oh no, you all thought I was dying? Or injured beyond the ability to call for help, Kael'thas confirmed miserably. We were so worried, we didn't know what to do. We thought maybe you'd been psychologically damaged, or your vocal cords had failed, or… Guys, Emma interrupted gently, and there was something in her voice that made them all fall silent, which they immediately found uncomfortable. I'm so sorry, I didn't realize. But humans, we're different. We actually need quiet time, like genuinely need it. Some of us more than others. I'm what we call an introvert, which means I recharge my energy by being alone and quiet. Too much social interaction actually exhausts me. That's backwards, Azila said faintly. That's completely backwards. For us, social interaction is energy. Being alone is like slowly suffocating. Wait, Vexthul said, his analytical mind starting to process this revelation. Are you saying that humans require periods of non-communication? That it's a biological need, not a symptom of distress? Exactly. Emma looked relieved that someone was getting it. I was just taking care of myself. Self-care through reading and quiet time. It's totally normal for humans. Kael'thas made a sound that didn't translate through any harmonic range. You weren't suffering at all. We were the ones suffering, watching you suffer, except you weren't suffering. You were having a nice, relaxing afternoon, Emma finished. Yeah, sorry about the panic attack. Can we? Azila hesitated, her medical curiosity warring with her cultural horror. Can we drop the containment field? I feel like we're torturing her by keeping her trapped. Actually, I didn't even notice it until a few minutes ago, Emma admitted. I was pretty absorbed in my book. Vexthul gestured, and the shimmering barrier dissolved. Emma stepped forward, still holding her book, and the young Velkari instinctively moved closer to her, not quite touching, but near enough that their communication organs could register her presence. So let me make sure I understand this, Vexthul said carefully, his diplomatic training working overtime to process this paradigm shift. You weren't injured. You weren't dying. You weren't abandoned by your social group. You weren't mourning. You weren't in any form of distress whatsoever. Nope, Emma confirmed cheerfully. Just reading. For 6.5 hours, Kael'thas added, as if saying it again might make it make sense. Has it been that long? Emma checked the chronometer on the wall. Huh, I guess it has. Time flies when you're enjoying a good book. I'm on the last one in the series. It's really hard to put down. Xilax pulled up his medical database again, scrolling frantically through human psychological profiles. But according to our records, humans are a social species. You form complex social bonds. You create communities. You experience loneliness when isolated. Oh, we definitely do, Emma interrupted. I love hanging out with you all. Yesterday's diplomatic dinner was great, and I really enjoyed teaching you about Earth music last week. But that's the thing. After a lot of social interaction, introverts like me need time to recharge. It's like, she paused, searching for an analogy. It's like how you need sleep, right? Social time is great, but then I need quiet time to process it all and get my energy back. You're comparing voluntary silence to a biological necessity? Azila's voice rose to frequencies normally reserved for extreme distress. Well, yeah. If I don't get enough quiet time, I get exhausted, irritable, overwhelmed. My brain literally needs the break from processing social interaction. The revelation was spreading through the ship's communication network. Every Velkari aboard was listening, their constant chatter replaced by stunned silence as they tried to process this information. The irony, that they were all going silent to learn about why the human had gone silent, was lost on none of them. This explains so much, Vexthul said slowly. Your request for private quarters when most species prefer communal living. Your odd habit of eating meals alone sometimes. The way you politely decline group activities every few days. We thought you were being polite about not liking us, Kelthas admitted quietly. Or that we'd somehow offended you. What? No! Emma looked genuinely distressed by this. I like you all so much. You're wonderful. I need breaks. It's not personal. It's just how human brains work. Well, some human brains. There are also extroverts who get energy from social interaction, but even they usually need some quiet time occasionally. So when you were sitting in here, reading, not talking to anyone, Azila was working through it methodically, her medical training helping her categorize this new information. You were actually taking care of your health? Like a medical treatment? Sort of. I mean, I don't think of it as medical, but yeah, it's self-care, mental health maintenance. If I don't do it, I start to break down emotionally. Zilax was frantically updating his medical files. This needs to go into the database immediately. No, this needs to go into every database. The entire Galactic Council needs to know this. Do you realize we almost declared a diplomatic emergency and contacted Earth to inform them of your death? You what? Emma's eyes went wide. We were minutes away from it, Vexthul confirmed. This could have become an interstellar incident. Earth might have thought we'd harmed you. There could have been investigations, sanctions. Because I was reading a book, Emma said faintly. Because you were silent for 6.5 hours without showing any signs of distress, Vexthul corrected. Which, for every species we've ever encountered until now, has meant serious medical emergency. Emma sat down heavily in her chair. I had no idea. I thought you all understood about quiet time. I mean, I mentioned it in my initial orientation paperwork. We thought it was a translation error, Kael'thas admitted. We thought you meant sleep, but the word got translated wrong. Who deliberately chooses silence? Humans, Emma said. Apparently just humans. The silence that followed Emma's statement was profound and deeply uncomfortable for every Velkari present. They shifted, their communication organs flickering with the instinctive need to fill the void with sound, with harmonics, with the constant reassurance that life was present. Emma noticed. See? That's what I mean. You guys literally can't stand silence. It makes you uncomfortable on a fundamental level. For me, it's the opposite. Too much noise and stimulation makes me uncomfortable. This is... Vexthul struggled for words, his harmonics cycling through confusion, fascination, and something approaching distress. This is fundamentally incompatible with how we understand consciousness itself. We define sentience partly by the ability and drive to communicate continuously. A being that chooses not to communicate is still sentient, Emma finished firmly, just recharging. I was still thinking, still reading, still present. I just wasn't vocalizing those thoughts. But how do we know you're all right if you're not telling us? Azila asked, and there was genuine fear in her voice. How do we know you haven't stopped existing somehow, even though your body is still there? Emma's expression softened. You're really worried about me, aren't you? Of course we are. Kael'thas's tendrils flared bright blue. You're our ambassador. You're our friend. His voice broke slightly. "We care about you. The thought of you suffering alone, unable to call for help, it was terrifying. Oh, you guys." Emma stood and moved closer to them, her body language open and warm in that distinctly human way. "That's actually really sweet. Misguided and panic-inducing, but sweet. Look, how about this? I promise that if I'm ever actually in distress, I'll make sure to vocalize it. I'll call for help. I won't just suffer in silence, okay? But how will we tell the difference?" Azila pressed. "Between peaceful quiet time and distressed silence." Emma thought for a moment. "Well, when I'm doing quiet time, I'm usually reading or meditating or doing something calm. I'm relaxed. My body language is open. Like this," she demonstrated, settling into her chair with loose shoulders and a peaceful expression. "When I'm distressed, I'd be tense, maybe crying. Definitely not calmly drinking tea and turning pages." "Crying," Zilax muttered, updating his files again. "Another silent human activity we need to learn to interpret correctly, though at least that one involves visible distress signals." "Actually," Emma said carefully, "not always. Sometimes humans cry when they're happy or relieved or watching something emotionally moving. We're complicated." 3 Velkari made sounds of profound dismay. "Let me contact the council," Vexthul said, pulling up his communication interface. "They need to know this isn't an emergency, and they need to understand the situation before we have the entire galactic fleet assuming Earth's ambassador has been harmed." His image flickered as he connected to the council chambers, where dozens of representatives still waited anxiously for news. "High Diplomat Vexthul reporting. The crisis has been resolved. Ambassador Emma is in perfect health." A chorus of relieved harmonics flooded through the channel. "However," Vexthul continued, "we have discovered something that requires immediate attention from the Xenopsychology Committee. It appears that humans—" He paused, clearly still struggling with the concept. "Humans require periods of voluntary non-communication as part of their normal psychological health maintenance." The silence from the council was deafening. Then, chaos. "Voluntary? Non-communication? As a health requirement? That's impossible. Is this a translation error?" Emma leaned into view of the communication pickup. "Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's true. I was just reading quietly for a few hours. It's totally normal for my species. Sorry for the panic." She said it so cheerfully, so casually, that the contrast between her tone and the magnitude of what she was describing created a cognitive dissonance that rippled through the entire council. "Ambassador Emma," one of the council elders spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Are you telling us that you can simply stop communicating for hours at a time, and this doesn't indicate any form of distress?" "Yep. In fact, forcing me to communicate constantly would actually cause me distress. I need the quiet time. It's not optional for my well-being." "But," the elder's harmonics wavered, "but how has your species survived? How do you maintain social cohesion? How do you know your pod members are safe if they're not constantly signaling their status?" "We check in periodically," Emma explained patiently, "and we've learned to read other signals, body language, facial expressions, context clues. If someone's been quiet for a reasonable amount of time and then shows up looking relaxed and happy, we assume they were fine. If they've been gone too long or show signs of distress, then we investigate." "What's a reasonable amount of time?" Kael'thas asked nervously. "Depends on the person and the situation. For me, a few hours of quiet reading time is normal. Some humans might go a whole day with minimal speaking, like if they're working on a complex project, or spending time in nature, or just need a mental health day." "A whole day?" Azila looked faint. "Some people go on silent retreats for weeks," Emma added, then immediately regretted it as all 4 Velkari made sounds of horror. "But that's, an extreme example. The point is, silence is normal for humans. It doesn't mean something's wrong." Vexthul was already drafting new protocols, his fingers flying across his interface. "We need to update every single piece of documentation. Human silent periods do not constitute medical emergencies. Human isolation preferences are not signs of social rejection. Human need for quiet time is a legitimate biological requirement, not a symptom of psychological damage. We should probably add guidelines for how to check if a human is okay without disturbing their quiet time, Emma suggested. Like, if you're worried, you could send a text message. That's silent communication we do through our devices. Or just observe from a distance to see if I look relaxed versus distressed. Text messages, Zilax repeated, adding this to his growing list. Silent communication methods. Of course, humans would develop those, wouldn't they? We have a lot of them, Emma confirmed. Writing, typing, sign language. Oh, that's a whole language done entirely without speaking, for humans who are deaf or prefer not to use verbal communication. A whole language without vocalization? Kael'thas's voice had gone up several octaves. On purpose? Humans are really diverse in how we communicate, Emma said. Some of us talk a lot. Some of us talk very little. Some prefer writing, some prefer speaking. Some need lots of social time, some need lots of quiet time. It's all normal variation. The council chamber had erupted in dozens of overlapping conversations as representatives tried to process this information and its implications. Vex Thul finally muted them all, focusing back on Emma and the young diplomats. This is going to require a complete overhaul of how we understand human psychology, he said, and possibly how we understand consciousness itself. The idea that a sentient being would choose silence, would need silence, that silence could be restorative rather than destructive. It's just different, Emma said gently. Not wrong, not broken. Just different from how your species works. You need constant communication to feel alive and connected. I need periods of silence to feel balanced and healthy. Neither is better or worse, they're just different. Azila had moved closer, her medical sensors still active but now reading Emma with new understanding. When you were sitting there reading, you really were content, happy. Very, Emma confirmed with a warm smile. It was exactly what I needed today. Though I have to say, this conversation has been pretty draining, so I might need some more quiet time later to process it all. Of course, Kael'thas said immediately, then paused. Wait, is it okay if we monitor you from a distance? Just to, make sure you're really okay? Even if we understand intellectually that you're fine, I think it's going to take time for my hearts to believe it. Emma's smile widened. That's really sweet, Kael'thas. Yes, you can check on me. Just maybe don't panic and declare medical emergencies. New protocol, Vex Thul announced. If Ambassador Emma is silent but appears relaxed, with book or tea in hand, reading or resting peacefully, no alarm is to be raised. Visual confirmation that she's engaged in quiet time activities is sufficient.